early in the 1st century AD. On the left bank of the River Seine, Roman engineers were tracing the contours of the future Lutetia. To do so, they took up position on the hill, today's Montagne Sainte-Geneviève, which is now 172 Rue Saint-Jacques.
The slopes of the Montagne Sainte-Geneviève, which culminates at a height of 56 meters, presented them with a kind of panoramic showcase. They could place the various monuments at different levels, so they could be seen by visitors arriving via the Seine. So it was a display of strength on the part of the Roman authorities.
Using a groma, a surveying instrument with 4 plumb lines, the Roman engineers traced the first road, the Cardo Maximus. 2 kilometers long and running north and south, it allowed people to cross the river and connected the cities of Senlis and Orléans. From this main axis, they then traced a series of perpendicular roads, this time running east and west, the Decumani. The result was a perfect grid system typical of Roman cities, composed of square modules of 300 Roman feet or 88 meters wide.
Someone from a city in northern Gaul could go to a city in Italy, Spain, or North Africa and immediately find his bearings in the same grid plan. He'd know where to find the necropolis if he wanted to visit a grave, where to buy food, where to listen to a political speech, where the city's public baths were.
Among the essential buildings was the Forum. 177 meters long by 88 meters wide, it fit perfectly into 2 models of the grid plan. To the east was the Basilica, where the city's political and legal business was conducted. To the west, a temple surrounded by a gallery with a colonnade. This was the religious heart of Lutetia.
We think it was dedicated either to the Capitoline Triad, the 3 main deities of Roman religion, Jupiter, the king of the gods, his wife Juno, and his daughter Minerva, or to the emperor. We did find a monumental statue, which we can probably identify as Juno, the goddess of war and peace.
A building the remains of which were discovered by Theodore Vacher between the Boulevard Saint-Michel and the Rue Saint-Jacques during the construction of the Rue Soufflot. The excavations, spread across 2 decades, enabled the archaeologist to reconstruct the plan.
It's a tripartite forum with a temple to the west on a podium wall. In the center, a vast courtyard and a basilica to the east. And he noted that the western side sat on top of a cryptoporticus, a series of underground vaulted corridors which supported the ground floor of the building.
An underground U-shaped gallery, the main function of which was to compensate for the slope on which the forum was constructed. This way, the cryptoporticus acted as a support for a colonnade and the section where the temple would be built. Of the Lutetia Forum, only a few finely carved stones remain. These are kept at Paris's Carnavalet Museum. So to get a better idea of the gigantic nature of this building, we need to travel 200 kilometers to Durocortorum, or ancient Reims. The capital city of Gallia Belgica, whose cryptoporticus remains almost intact.
The gallery behind me is about 50 meters long, and it connected to another of 100 meters in length. So it was an enormous monument. The gallery is 10 meters wide and 5 meters tall to the center of the vaults. So it's really a very spectacular structure.
Vaults built with a revolutionary material at the time, concrete. Invented by the Romans, this mortar is a mixture of sand, lime, and water. Combined with stone blocks, it was then poured onto a wooden cast to form the vault. Once dry, it was as solid as rock.
The great thing about the Roman vault was that once it was cast, it became a solid block of concrete. There was no lateral thrust, so they could build wide spans with no need for buttressing. Plus, the older it got, the harder it got. Roman concrete was fantastic for that.
A material without which many Roman edifices would never have survived to this day. Starting with this cryptoporticus, the purpose of which is still open to debate. A storage space for some, a place to stroll in for others. Here, some traces of paint may start to provide an answer.
Here there are some remains of plaster, which tells us that all of the stones were in fact covered over and painted. We have a few traces of different colors, which implies decoration of some sort. That leads us to believe it wasn't just storage space, where they wouldn't really have needed to paint the walls.
While the exact purpose of the cryptoporticus is yet to be ascertained, we do know that the Forum had a vital function for the city: trade. Discovered by Theodore Vacher, a series of shops backing onto the vast facade walls opened onto a spacious gallery with plenty of passers-by. A setup that is also found just outside the Reims cryptoporticus.
They were stores selling foods, pottery, glassware, and so on. All kinds of different things, since there were a large number of these stores, and they were representative of all that Romanity could bring to the inhabitants of Gaul.
During the 1st century AD, the Parisi converted en masse to Roman culture. And through trade, some of them established colossal fortunes. But the acculturation of this tribe would never have been completed without access to one of the pillars of the Roman way of life: well-being. A concept embodied by one of the city's most prestigious buildings, the Cluny Baths. Located at the intersection of the Boulevard Saint-Germain and Saint-Michel, this is the only surviving building, and part of its elevations are almost intact.
The Cluny Baths are remarkably well preserved. It's one of the 2 best preserved large complexes in Gaul.
111 meters long and 90 meters wide, this complex was dedicated to hygiene and sport. From the palestra, where men trained for wrestling bouts, 2 corridors led to the far north of the building. Here, the bathers entered one of the 2 gymnasiums, which also served as locker rooms. Once undressed, they embarked on a route through a series of rooms and pools that grew hotter and hotter.
In the hottest rooms, the floors must have been scorching because the bathers had to wear sandals with wooden soles to stop their feet burning.
Hot water was a great luxury. The air must have been hard to breathe as you scrubbed and scraped your skin, because there was no soap back then. After that, there were massages. People hung out there, a bit like us lazing around in a bistro today.
The heated rooms at Cluny covered a surface area of 2,000 square meters, and the Romans needed to keep them at a constant temperature. A technological feat hidden beneath the building. This was the techno-center of the Cluny Baths. A maze of corridors, sewers, and furnaces.
This is the nerve centre of the baths, a cavity used for storing the wood that would be burned in the furnace. This produced hot air heating, which circulated beneath the bathers' feet. So it was underfloor heating. This furnace shows that there was a caldarium, a hot room above us, but it also bears witness to how this system spread throughout the empire, from the Mediterranean basin to the furthest reaches in the north.
A system known as hypocaust. Hot air produced by furnaces beneath the hot rooms filled the space between the floor and the ceiling, which was supported by small brick and earthenware pillars. To allow this hot air to circulate, the double walls were equipped with a network of tubes. Rectangular earthenware pipes then evacuated hot gases through chimneys. A system which not only heated the rooms, but also the water.
The furnace provided underfloor heating for the rooms, but it also heated boilers. You have to imagine lead boilers full of water being heated and then conducted to the various pools of the thermae.
While the remains of the Cluny Baths are impressive for the quality of their preservation and the vault of its frigidarium, culminating at 14 meters from the ground, they reveal only a small part of the original complex. Converted into a barn in the Middle Ages by the abbots of Cluny, it wasn't until 1852 that Theodore Vacher was able to draw up a plan with which he discovered a gigantic building which must have entailed one of the biggest construction sites the ancient city had ever known.
This was much more than constructing a building. It was designing a whole section of the city. The ground sloped down to the Seine, which meant there was a lot of terracing work, so this whole part of the city was reshaped. It's hard to imagine, but when we put all of these observations together, it doubles the size of the area we believed the Cluny Baths covered.
A complex that stretched across 10,000 square meters, double the surface area of Notre Dame. To build such a massive edifice, the Romans chose not to use stone, which would be too expensive in labor, but a revolutionary method that they had invented: opus mixtum. Roman concrete was poured into the space between two slender walls. Once dry, it produced the skeleton of the building and ensured its solidity. 4 layers of brickwork topped the wall, compensating for any imperfections and producing perfect horizontality.
The construction technique used at the Lutetia baths was used across the empire. It had the huge advantage of being fast to construct, plus they could use it everywhere, because there was nowhere in the empire without the possibility of making earthenware or quarrying limestone blocks. All the genius of Rome can be seen in the art of construction behind me.
While alternating layers of brick and limestone looks decorative today, the walls were in fact plastered over and covered with opulent paintings.
We know this because we have found some traces of paint. We know they used pigments, such as lapis lazuli, which were extremely expensive. Because if they wanted to promote the Rome brand politically, it had to have a visual impact.
So beyond the astounding dimension of the Cluny Baths, visitors were also treated to incredible luxury. Like in this room, which has lost its roof, but which once housed a hypocaust-heated swimming pool, one of the largest in the Roman world.
The construction of the Cluny Baths must have cost several million sesterces. Sadly, we have no material proof of this, but several million is a fair estimate. Because to become a Roman senator, you needed a minimal private fortune of 1 million sesterces, so we're talking big sums of money.
An outsized project made possible thanks to euergetism, an ancient Greek principle developed by the Romans, which obliged elite citizens to make a financial contribution for the improvement of their city.
It's a bit like forcing today's billionaires to build a new opera house. Ah, Monsieur Pinault, you want an opera? Pay for it. We'll make you culture minister. That was the system. They couldn't refuse to pay.
Beyond the honorary function, Erugetism also gave the benefactor the right to have his name carved on the building. But no such inscriptions have been found at the Cluny Baths. The identity of the generous donator seems lost forever. And yet, one discovery made by Theodore Vacher gave future archaeologists another lead, the starting point of which is a supposed fountain found to the south of the building.
The supposed fountain at the center of the south facade is here. It was placed by the discoveries of Theodore Vacher at the intersection of the Rue Champollion and the Rue des Écoles here.
A fountain with an axis that cuts right through the cella of the Forum Temple. And even more mysteriously, through a second fountain discovered in the 1990s in the northern part of the baths.
The monumental fountain in the center of the northern facade is here. This facade is slightly larger than the south facade, as if they wanted to take advantage of maximum space along the Seine to emphasize the effect of monumentality when seen from the river.
Why did the Romans want to give this facade such monumentality? The answer could lay in this fountain, which was seen by all travelers arriving by the river.
Sadly, it had been stripped bare, but there was definitely a statue in the middle of this fountain. We believe, although this is still hypothetical, that it was an imperial statue. So the edifice may have been donated by the emperor, but of course this is only a hypothesis.
So the Cluny Baths may have been financed by the Emperor Hadrian or Antonius Pius. Proof that in less than 2 centuries, Lutetia had become a major city in northern Gaul. Renown which it owed to its great monuments, but not only. Because it had in abundance another crucial asset for the growth of any Roman city, water.
The role of water in the Roman city was extremely important because the Romans had a huge appetite for running water, which often arrived by aqueduct. So for the Romans, water was a symbol of civilization.
An aqueduct which took its source 15 kilometers from Lutetia at Rungis. A small valley with clear water and a height of 64 meters.
Well, the idea is that the aqueduct starts somewhere that's higher than where it finishes. And so what you want is to have a very gentle slope all the way along the aqueduct. And it's been calculated at 1 millimeter per meter. So the trick was to actually create a channel that had a constant gradient of that sort.
For this, Roman surveyors used a chorobates, a wooden tool with a small cavity filled with water to act as a level. If it doesn't overflow, then the chorobates is perfectly horizontal. The user then simply aims the tool and determines the height of the next point. The route of the Lutetia aqueduct was thus traced by following the curves of the level over a distance of 26 kilometers. But the engineers encountered a problem. The route needed to cross a valley that was too wide to be bypassed, the Valley of Arcueil. An obstacle that the Romans crossed with an aqueduct bridge, of which only this 10-meter tall pillar remains, integrated into the walls of the Château des Arcs, constructed in the 16th century.
The Romans crossed the valley at the narrowest point, and the result was this aqueduct bridge, 330 meters long and 14 meters high, composed of 25 arches separated by massive piles with 4 buttresses, 2 on each face. And here are 2 of them.
An edifice which made way for the Medici aqueduct, constructed in the 18th century, and heightened in the 19th during the extensive work by Baron Haussmann.
It's interesting to see how the recent aqueduct in large part follows the line of the ancient one. The Romans found the solution, so all we had to do was follow it.
While Roman aqueducts are often associated with bridges like this, they were actually buried for most of their route. Like this section discovered during the laying out of the Parc Montsouris.
Here we have a buried section in cast concrete. The Romans dug a trench and then poured in concrete to form the base. Then the two uprights, and it all forms a perfectly even U-shape. This is opus signinum, mortar with crushed brick, which produces a completely watertight concrete to cover the inside surface of the channel.
With its amphitheatre, its baths, and its forum, in under 3 centuries, Lutetia had become a little Rome in northern Gaul. In doing so, Rome had risen to its challenge to make the Parisi perfect citizens of the empire and to impose lasting peace in the region. Who then could have imagined that the city was about to fight for its survival? The 3rd century AD. Bringing an end to 3 centuries of Pax Romana, hordes of barbarians from the north raided Gaul. In passing, whole cities were pillaged or burned. Raids which would drastically change the face of Roman cities.
In the late 3rd century, the cities faced a lot of problems, so all the monumental ornamentation soon began to disappear. The huge buildings didn't really fit with the real needs of the community. These buildings were outsized, which is fine during periods of prosperity, but once times started to become tougher, then it all came tumbling down like a house of cards in a couple of decades.
In Lutetia, the amphitheatre, the forum, the aqueduct, and then the baths all stopped functioning, while whole sections of the city were abandoned.
The city shrank. Burial grounds were established in areas which had once been residential districts.
Part of the population started inhabiting the city differently, while the other part left for the countryside.
A crisis to which the emperor responded by constructing a network of fortified cities along the borders of his empire. Among them, those which would become the modern cities of Amiens, Soissons, Reims, and of course, Paris. Indeed, Lutetia was designated as the barrier able to prevent the invading barbarians from going beyond the river, a strategic position for which it would need to fortify itself to make itself impregnable.
Lutetia would withdraw to the Ile de la Cité, which offered the ideal location for self-defense.
The Ile de la Cité, the island that links the left and right banks of Paris. But during Roman times, it was 2 times smaller and surrounded by tumultuous waters.
At the time, the river was much wider and wilder than it is now. It was more like the Loire.
Natural protection to which the Romans would add strong walls. Constructed between 320 and 360, it measured about 1,700 meters all around. The walls were 4 meters thick at the base, 12 meters high, and equipped with a walkway. Discovered by Theodore Vaquer in 1880 during excavations for the foundations of the police headquarters and the Hôtel Dieu hospital, some of the remains are preserved in the archaeological crypt below the forecourt of Notre Dame. Like these blocks of stone which made up the substructure of the walls. Blocks which, contrary to appearances, did not come from the quarries of Paris.
Here we have traces of mortar, hoisting notches. Some capital letters which could be inscriptions of the Curia, the remains of an entablature, and 3 blocks here which bear traces that suggest they came from the seating of the amphitheatre, because the ware looks like it was made by spectators' backsides.
So the amphitheatre and forum provided the materials for the defensive walls on the Ile de la Cité. Dismantled block by block, they would disappear from the cityscape and fall into oblivion.
In the 4th century, an economy of recuperation, resale and redistribution was established, of marble and small and large blocks of limestone. These large blocks arrived intact on the island and were recut on site to find the necessary sizes and shapes for the walls.
Protected behind its tall ramparts, the Ile de la Cité became a rear base for the Roman legions. Troops for whom new infrastructures would be constructed. But before that, there was a big problem to deal with: the flooding of the island's banks.
When the army arrived in the 4th century, the island wasn't as it is now. Several islets had been joined together in the 1st century, but there were still parts that became flooded. So the army brought in huge amounts of rubble. We estimate it at 1.5 to 2 meters deep to form a solid plateau on the island, reinforced with Roman concrete, covering all the roads and paths on the island.
A platform which required today's equivalent of 200 mega truckloads of rubble. Roman-scale work, thanks to which the new heart of Lutetia could welcome new constructions. Among them, a basilica, the foundations of which were once again discovered by Théodore Vacher. Baths of 200 square meters, an astonishing 50 times smaller than those of Cluny. And finally, in a room forbidden to the public, the best preserved remains in the archaeological crypt. A building whose purpose still divides archaeologists.
This wall is special because it has double protection. It has buttresses, these big blocks which support the thrust from elevation. What's more, they have a discharging arch system, which makes you think the elevation was very high.
A massive edifice reaching an estimated height of 10 meters. A structure that some researchers have identified as a horium, a highly securitized military warehouse.
This building contained all the supplies of the army: food, uniforms, lots of wheat. So the building needed to be protected against theft and fire. The size of the building shows that the island had become a barracks for a large garrison, an important part in the defense system of northern Gaul.
In a few decades, Lutetia had lost its monumental ornamentation and become a garrison city. A city whose fate would change with the arrival of Julian and his troops. It was here, on the Ile de la Cité, in 362, that his men would proclaim him Emperor of Rome.
They acclaimed him, embraced him, carried him on their shoulders. It was a very important event because it contributed to the renown of the city and the construction of an imperial palace, which would later become the Merovingian Palace and the Capetian Palace, without which Paris wouldn't be Paris.
Lutetia then lost its name and became the city of the Parisi, Paris. A century and a half later, in 508, Clovis, the king of the Franks, would make the former Roman city his capital, thus sealing forever the fate of the City of Light.